Welcome to the Pocket MBA, where we break down the big ideas that really drive modern business. Today, we are getting into a topic that I think is, well, probably the single most important factor for any team that wants to innovate, learn, or just plain perform. We're talking about psychological safety.
We are, and this is so essential. If you're in leadership, or you're aspiring to be, and you're wondering why your team of brilliant people sometimes seems, stuck, this conversation is for you. We're going to give you the framework to understand what's really going on.
And we start with this central paradox of the knowledge economy. We're living in what they call a VUCA world. Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. So organizations, quite rightly, go out and they spend a fortune hiring the sharpest, most capable people they can find.
The absolute best talent.
And yet, so often, the most crucial knowledge that those people have, it just stays locked in their heads.
It gets stuck. And you have to ask why, right? These are smart, motivated people. It's because they are often just a little bit reluctant to stand out or to challenge an idea or even just to admit they might have been wrong about something.
They fear the social cost.
That's it, exactly. They do a quick, almost unconscious calculation, and they decide that silence is just the safer personal bet.
And that tiny individual act of self-preservation, when it scales across an entire organization, can be utterly catastrophic. Our conversation today is really anchored in the incredible research of Harvard professor Amy Edmondson, especially in her book, The Fearless Organization.
Yes, she's the one who really defined this for us. She frames psychological safety as a shared belief within a team. It's the belief that the environment is safe for what she calls interpersonal risk-taking.
Which is such a brilliant phrase. It's not about being comfortable.
No, not at all. It's not about being nice or avoiding disagreement. It's the opposite. It means you feel you can speak up with a question, a concern, a half-baked idea without being humiliated or ignored, or worst of all, blamed if it doesn't pan out.
It's the switch that flips an employee from thinking, how do I protect myself, to how do we solve this problem?
And the data is just overwhelming at this point. This isn't some, soft, feel-good HR thing. It is a direct, measurable driver of value, of learning, of innovation.
And the story of how this all started is just fantastic.
Yeah.
It was completely by accident, wasn't it?
It was. Back in the mid-90s, Edmondson was a PhD student, and she was studying medication errors in hospitals. Her hypothesis was, pretty straightforward. The better teams, the ones with better communication and collaboration, they'll make fewer mistakes.
Which seems perfectly logical. Of course they would. Better teamwork, fewer errors.
It should be. But the data she got back it was the complete opposite. The teams that scored highest for things like mutual respect, for good collaboration, they were the ones reporting way more errors.
Way more.
In some cases, 10 times more than the teams that scored poorly.
My goodness. That must have been baffling. Was she thinking that good teamwork was somehow making people careless?
Exactly. It was a total mystery. It completely contradicted her hypothesis. And then she had what she calls her eureka moment. She realized she wasn't looking at error rates. She was looking at error reporting rates. The good teams didn't necessarily make more mistakes. They had just created a climate of openness where it was safe to talk about them. A nurse could say, I think I just gave the wrong dosage, without fearing for her job.
So they were actually learning from their mistakes, while the other teams...
The other teams were just hiding them. They were suppressing the data to avoid the personal fallout. And that, of course, means you can never, ever fix the underlying problem.
That one insight launched, 25 years of research?
Pretty much. All dedicated to this question of how you turn that fear-driven silence into learning-driven candor.
So, for you listening, our mission today is really threefold. First, we'll unpack what psychological safety actually is, and just as importantly, what it isn't. Then we'll look at the truly devastating cost of its absence, using some very famous, very real case studies.
And finally, and this is the most important part, we're going to give you a practical 3-part leadership toolkit that you can use to start building it.
I think Edmondson uses a great analogy for this. She says psychological safety isn't the fuel that powers the car.
Right. It's not the motivation or the talent. It's what takes the brakes off. It's the essential condition that lets that high-performance engine you built actually run at full throttle without constantly sabotaging itself.
Okay, so let's drill down into what this construct actually is. You said it's a group-level phenomenon.
Yes, that's key. It's not about one person's personality. It's a shared belief about the climate. It's that feeling of the way things are around here. And it's often tacit, it's not something people consciously think about every day, but it governs their behavior constantly.
It emerges from respect, from trust.
Yeah.
A sense that the team won't punish you for speaking up.
Whether that's an idea for a new product or, admitting you completely messed up a client presentation.
Now, this is where I think a lot of leaders get confused. They mix it up with older concepts. Let's start with one: group cohesiveness.
Oh, this is such a critical distinction. For decades, we thought that a really cohesive team, everyone's close, they're all friends, was the ideal.
The ultimate goal.
Right. But then the research on groupthink came along from Irving Janis, and it showed that if a group is too cohesive, it can actually be a bad thing.
Because everyone wants to maintain harmony.
Exactly. People start to prioritize conformity and, getting along over critically evaluating ideas. They don't want to rock the boat,
So they suppress their own dissenting opinions to avoid conflict.
which is the exact opposite of interpersonal risk-taking. Psychological safety isn't about everyone agreeing. It's about feeling safe enough to disagree constructively. It's about candor, not comfort.
That makes perfect sense. Now let's tackle the two big, dangerous myths that I see managers fall into all the time. Myth number one: psychological safety just means lowering performance standards.
This is the big one. It's the number one reason skeptical managers push back. They hear safety and they think soft. They think, well, if I can't hold people accountable for failure, they'll just stop trying.
It's the comfort zone.
Right. And it's a complete misunderstanding of the dynamic. Psychological safety is actually what enables you to set incredibly ambitious goals. Because if you set a huge stretch goal, failure and setbacks are inevitable. You need people to be honest about what's not working so you can course correct.
Which brings us to that famous 2x2 matrix, the high-performance quadrant. This is such a useful tool.
It is. So picture two axes. On the vertical axis, you have psychological safety from low to high. On the horizontal, you have performance standards and accountability, also low to high.
And the goal, obviously, is that top right quadrant.
That's the sweet spot. High safety, high standards. That is the learning and high performance zone. It's where teams can innovate, give honest feedback, take risks, and hold each other accountable. It's where the magic happens.
But the other three quadrants are where most organizations live, and they are problematic. Let's start with the bottom left. Low safety, low standards.
We call that the apathy zone. Frankly, not much is expected, and no one feels safe enough to care anyway. People are just coasting, collecting a paycheck. It's low stress, but it's also total stagnation.
Now, the one that really scares me is the bottom right. Low psychological safety, but high performance standards.
The anxiety zone. And this is where so many high-pressure organizations operate. They think fear is a motivator. People are terrified of making a mistake. They work incredibly hard, but it's all driven by fear of punishment. So the second they hit a real problem, what do?
They hide it.
They hide it. They cut corners. They fudge the numbers because the personal threat of admitting failure is just too great. This zone is a breeding ground for burnout and eventually for catastrophic ethical failures.
And what about the top left? That seems pleasant, at least. High safety, but low standards.
That's the comfort zone. It's a lovely place to work. Everyone's very nice and supportive. You can speak your mind, but nobody's pushing for excellence. The results are mediocre. You have great relationships, but you're not actually achieving anything remarkable.
So the key takeaway for a leader is, if you're seeing signs of burnout, of deception, of people just hiding bad news, the answer isn't to lower the standards. It's to radically increase the psychological safety.
Precisely. It's a culture problem, not a performance problem.
Okay, misconception number two. This is a bit more subtle. Confusing psychological safety with trust.
They're related, but they're not the same thing. And the difference is really important. Trust is about an interaction between two people. It's what we call dyadic. I trust you to have my back. I trust my boss to be fair in my performance review. It's one-to-one.
Whereas psychological safety is about the whole group.
Exactly. It's a property of the climate. I might trust my boss, Bob, completely. We have a great one-on-one relationship. But if Bob runs team meetings where anyone who throws out a new idea gets shot down by the rest of the group, well, that's a low PS environment. Even though I trust Bob, I'm still not going to speak up in that meeting because I don't trust the group's reaction.
That's such a crucial distinction. It means as a leader, it's not enough to just have good individual relationships. You have to actively shape the norms for the entire team.
You have to model it for everyone.
So let's talk about the evidence that took this from an interesting academic idea to a core business principle. Beyond the hospital study, there was a big manufacturing study in 1999.
Yeah, that was a key one. They looked at 51 different work teams in a big manufacturing company. So you had sales teams, R&D teams, production teams, a real mix. And the finding was crystal clear. The teams with higher psychological safety demonstrated way more what they called learning behaviors.
So things like experimenting, asking for feedback, talking openly about problems.
All of that. And here's the causal link. Those learning behaviors, in turn, were what predicted higher team performance.
So it's not that safety directly makes you perform better. It's that safety allows you to learn, and learning is what makes you perform better.
That's the mechanism. And they also found that the biggest drivers of that safety were the team leaders themselves. Leaders who coached their teams and actively invited input were the ones creating these high-learning environments.
Which, of course, brings us to the most famous confirmation of all this work, Google's Project Aristotle.
The ultimate data-driven case study. Google, being Google, wanted to figure out what made their best teams tick. So they threw all their analytical power at it. They studied 180 teams, looked at every possible variable, personalities, skills, demographics, whether they socialized outside of work.
They were looking for the perfect recipe. You need one extrovert, two coders, one person with a PhD.
Right, the magic formula.
Yeah.
And they found nothing.
Nothing at all.
Zero. None of those composition factors predicted team effectiveness. It was a huge dead end for their research team, until one of them stumbled across the academic work on psychological safety. And as one of the researchers said, once they started looking at that, everything fell into place.
It's just amazing that a company like Google, a company built on algorithms, found that the most important factor was something so human.
It was the bedrock. They identified it as the single most important dynamic. It was the foundation that made all the other things like clear goals, dependability, a sense of impact, even possible. Think about it. How can you have dependability if team members don't feel safe enough to say, hey, I'm falling behind, I need some help? You can't.
Even at the smartest company in the world, talent isn't enough. If the climate isn't safe, that talent just holds back. So if that's the foundation of high performance, what happens when it's missing? This is where we move into the danger zone. And it all comes down to what Edmondson calls the asymmetry of voice and silence.
Yes. This is the silent calculation that happens in our head 1,000 times a day. It's the gravitational pull toward just keeping quiet. Let's break down the logic. To speak up to voice a concern takes effort, takes a bit of courage. And there's an immediate personal risk. You might look stupid, you might offend someone.
And the potential benefit, what? An improvement for the company. That's uncertain, it's delayed, and it's shared among everyone. You probably won't get a bonus for it.
Exactly. Now compare that to silence. Silence is easy. It's the default. And the benefit of silence is immediate and 100% certain. You protect yourself from any negative social consequences right now.
The organization might suffer down the road, but your personal risk in that moment is zero.
The logic is just.
Yeah.
It's brutally simple, which is why silence is the default in most hierarchies.
It's the origin of that phrase, no one ever got fired for being silent. Even if it's not literally true, it feels true.
Oh, absolutely. There's a story in the book about a manufacturing technician. He had a great idea to improve a process, but he just sat on it for months. When a manager finally asked him why he didn't bring it up, he said, I've got kids in college.
Wow.
And when the manager pressed him, he even admitted the company was fair, that they never fired anybody for speaking up. But the fear, it was just this deep, irrational instinct that challenging the status quo was a risk to his livelihood.
And when that fear becomes the culture of an entire company, the results are, well, they're the stuff of business school case studies. Let's start with Volkswagen and Dieselgate.
A perfect example of the anxiety zone. In 2007, the CEO, Martin Winterkorn, sets this incredibly aggressive goal, become the world's #1 automaker. And a key part of that was conquering the U.S. market with clean diesel cars.
The problem being the technology wasn't actually there, not in a way that could meet U.S. emissions standards.
The engineers knew it. They knew it was basically impossible with their current engines. But you had this impossible goal coming from a CEO who was known for creating what some insiders called a reign of terror.
High standards, low safety.
The absolute definition of it. So what's the path of least resistance for an engineer in that environment? Is it to go to the terrifying CEO and say, sir, what you're asking for can't be done? Or is it to quietly design a brilliant piece of software that cheats on the emissions tests? It was an act of organizational self-preservation.
They found it easier and safer to build a massive global deception than to deliver bad news up the chain of command.
That's it. And the result was 11 million cars with this device, billions in fines, and a reputation just shredded, all because of a culture of fear.
We see the same toxic mix at Wells Fargo with their fake account scandal.
Oh, yes. The going for great strategy. The goal was for every employee to sell 8 different products to every single customer.
A completely arbitrary and, as it turned out, impossible target.
The frontline bank tellers knew it was impossible. I mean, there's a natural limit to how many bank accounts and credit cards one person actually needs. But the targets were tied to everything: their bonuses, their job security. The message from management, whether spoken or not, was hit your numbers or else.
Produce or you're out.
So what did they do? They found it was less risky to break the law, to open millions of fake accounts without customer consent, than it was to tell their managers that the entire corporate strategy was flawed.
The silence about the strategy's failure forced the deception.
Absolutely. The system incentivized fraud over truth-telling.
And it's not just about fraud. This can lead to a complete failure to innovate, which is what happened with Nokia.
Yes, the fall of Nokia is a tragic story of fear. In-depth investigations after their collapse found this fearful emotional climate was a major cause. You had senior executives who were terrified of Apple and Google, but they were afraid to admit how far behind Nokia really was.
So they put on a brave face.
And then you had the middle managers who were terrified of their own temperamental senior leaders. So they would file these overly optimistic reports about the capabilities of Nokia's Symbian operating system, even when they knew it was a dog compared to iOS.
Nobody wanted to be the bearer of bad news.
No one. The truth was just too dangerous to say out loud. And because of that pervasive silence, Nokia couldn't learn, couldn't adapt, and couldn't pivot until it was far, far too late.
This cost of silence goes beyond money, though. It can jeopardize physical safety. The classic example is in aviation, the Tenerife Air disaster in 1977.
It's the watershed moment for safety culture. Two Boeing 747s collide on a runway in thick fog. 583 people died, and it was almost entirely due to the psychology of hierarchy.
The KLM captain, a very senior and respected pilot, was in a rush and started his takeoff roll without proper clearance from air traffic control.
And his junior crew members, the first officer and the flight engineer, they knew something was wrong. They could hear the other plane was still on the runway.
The flight engineer even asked very tentatively, "Is he not clear? That Pan American?"
It's just a heartbreaking moment to read on the transcript. He has the critical piece of information that could save everyone's life, but he phrases it as a timid question. He doesn't shout "Stop P" because he is so conditioned to defer to the captor's authority. He instinctively overweights the small, immediate risk of annoying the captain and underweights the massive, catastrophic risk of a collision.
And post-Tenerife, the entire industry changed. They created crew resource management, CRM.
Which is basically institutionalized psychological safety. It trains co-pilots how to be more assertive, and it trains captains how to actively invite and listen to dissent. It made speaking up a non-negotiable protocol.
We see the same deference to authority in healthcare. The Dana-Farber Cancer Institute case is just chilling. A patient died from a massive overdose of chemotherapy.
4 times the correct dose.
4 times. And the nurses and pharmacists, they saw this unbelievable number on the prescription. They saw the patient having horrific symptoms.
They saw the data right in front of them. But they were in this world-renowned institution, and the order came from a high-status position, so they doubted themselves. They thought, the mistake must be, in my understanding, not in the doctor's order. They didn't push back hard enough.
As the patient's mother later said, her life could have been saved if someone had just felt safe enough to step forward and say, "Stop. Something is very, very wrong here."
The fear of questioning authority was literally fatal. And you see it again with NASA's Columbia shuttle tragedy. An engineer named Rodney Arocha was convinced a piece of foam had seriously damaged the shuttle's wing on takeoff.
He had the evidence. He saw the video. He wanted them to use spy satellites to get a better look.
But his direct boss shut him down. And then in the big mission management meeting where they decided not to investigate further, Rocha was there, but he just sat in the back and said nothing. When an investigator asked him later why he didn't speak up directly to the mission manager, Linda Ham, he said, and I'll never forget this, I just couldn't do it. He said, "I'm too low down, and she is way up here," and he held his hand way above his head.
The invisible power of the hierarchy.
It was more real to him in that moment than the physical danger to the astronauts. His self-preservation instinct kicked in because the culture had not made it safe for him to challenge someone at her level.
It's clear then, silence isn't a passive state. It's an act of danger. It's the default setting for most organizations, and it has to be deliberately and constantly fought against.
So if silence is the enemy, a leader's job really is to be the chief architect of candor. And it's not about just, having an open door policy. It's about three continuous active behaviors: setting the stage, inviting participation, and responding productively.
Right, so step one is all about framing. You have to set the context for why speaking up is not just welcome, but essential. And that starts with purpose.
It does. You have to constantly emphasize purpose. Remind people why their work matters. What are the stakes? Who are we serving? When you connect people to a powerful mission, it changes that risk calculation we talked about. The risk of letting the team down or failing the mission starts to feel bigger than the personal risk of looking silly.
The example of DaVita Kidney Care is a great one here.
Yeah, the CEO, Kent Thury, he created this incredibly strong culture, calling his employees teammates and using this motto, one for all and all for one. It might sound a bit cheesy, but in a business like dialysis, where you are literally keeping vulnerable people alive, that sense of shared purpose is incredibly powerful.
It makes speaking up about a potential safety issue not an act of criticism, but an act of duty to the patient and the team.
Exactly. The purpose provides the motivation.
Okay, so you've set the purpose.
Yeah.
Now you have to tackle the biggest monster in the room, the fear of failure. You have to reframe failure.
This is non-negotiable, and leaders have to be the first ones to do it. Look at Ed Catmull, the co-founder of Pixar. He has this famous line, early on, all of our movies suck.
Which is just an amazing thing for a leader to say out loud.
It's so powerful. What he's doing is he's destigmatizing failure. He's framing it as a normal, expected, and necessary part of the creative process. If everyone knows the first draft is supposed to be bad, then sharing it isn't scary anymore. It's just part of the job.
But this is where managers get nervous. They think, if I celebrate failure, won't people just get lazy? Which is why the failure typology is so important.
You're right. You can't treat all failures the same. You'll end up back in that comfort zone. Edmondson argues you have to teach your team to distinguish between three different types.
Let's start with the bad one, preventable failures.
These are the ones you should never celebrate. This is when there's a known process, a clear checklist, and someone deviates from it through inattention or corner cutting. A surgeon leaving a sponge in a patient. That's a preventable failure.
And that requires correction. It requires accountability.
Absolutely. Psychological safety does not mean a lack of accountability for breaking known rules.
Okay, then there's the middle category, complex failures.
Right. These are the ones where a whole bunch of different factors, often in different systems, interact in a new and unpredictable way to cause a problem. A power grid failure, for example. There's usually no single person to blame. These failures are often unavoidable, but they are massive learning opportunities to make the system more robust.
And finally, the good stuff, intelligent failures.
These are the failures we have to actively encourage and celebrate. An intelligent failure is the result of a thoughtful experiment in new territory. You have a hypothesis, you run a good test, but the result isn't what you hoped for. This is the very essence of innovation. Every single breakthrough product is built on a mountain of intelligent failures.
Like at Google X, the Moonshot Factory. Their leader, AstroTeller, actually rewards teams for killing their own projects.
They get a bonus for it. Why? Because Teller's frame is, I'm not pro-failure, I'm pro-learning. Killing a project that isn't working is a huge success. It saves money, frees up talented people, and provides invaluable data for the next attempt.
Leaders have to be explicit about this. We celebrate intelligent failure here because it's how we learn faster than anyone else.
So once you've framed the work, you can't just sit back and wait for people to talk. The gravity of silence is too strong. You have to actively invite them in.
And this starts with something that a lot of leaders find difficult: situational humility.
It's tough for people who are used to being the smartest person in the room. But in a complex world, it's just realism. You, as the leader, cannot possibly have all the answers. The expertise is distributed throughout your team.
So situational humility is about admitting that.
It's about saying, I don't know. When Anne Mulcahy was turning Xerox around, she was famous for it. People called her the master of I don't know. By admitting her own gaps, she created a vacuum that her experts felt compelled and empowered to fill.
The clothing designer Eileen Fisher does something similar.
She calls herself a don't-knower. She models that vulnerability, which signals to her entire team that it's okay not to have the perfect answer and that exploration is valued more than certainty. Humility is contagious.
So beyond just being humble, you have to actively ask. Proactive inquiry.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to ask good questions, powerful questions. Think about Julie Morath, the hospital COO. She wasn't getting any feedback on safety issues. So she didn't give a lecture. She just started asking every team this one simple question. Was everything as safe as you would like it to have been this week with your patients?
That's a brilliant question. It's not accusatory. It's not, did you make a mistake?
No, it reframes the issue around a shared goal, patient safety, and a shared responsibility. It lowers the barrier to entry for speaking up so dramatically.
And sometimes you need to go further and actually design structures for input.
You do. Because sometimes the informal hierarchy is just too powerful to overcome with questions alone. The story of Bob Chapman at Barry Wemler is perfect. They were trying to redesign a workflow in a machine shop. Two different teams of managers and engineers came up with plans, and both failed in practice.
Because they were designed in a conference room, not on the shop floor.
Exactly. So for the third attempt, they created a new structure. They put 10 of the frontline workers, the forklift drivers, the assemblers on the design team. And of course, it worked. Because as Chapman said, they had earned the right to have an opinion. By formalizing their input, they bypassed the informal status barriers.
And that even more dramatic example at the Anglo-American mine in South Africa,
where the CEO, Cynthia Carroll, literally shut down a dangerous mine to force a change. To get the miners to talk, they couldn't just have a suggestion box. They adopted the traditional Lekgotla assembly. Everyone sits in a circle, a symbol of equality. Everyone gets to speak without interruption. And they reframed the question from, what are the safety problems, to what do we need to create a work environment of care and respect?
the structure and the question work together to create safety where none existed before. Okay, so you've set the stage, you've invited people to speak, but the whole system lives or dies in the seconds after they do. This is the final piece, responding productively.
This is the moment of truth, and the first thing to get your head around is the imperfect relationship between process and outcome. In a complex world, you can have a brilliant process and still get a bad outcome because of bad luck or uncertainty, and you can have a terrible process and get a good outcome because you got lucky.
Like Wells Fargo did for years.
Exactly. So if you only reward good outcomes and punish bad ones, you're encouraging luck and reckless behavior. Leaders have to learn to decouple the process from the outcome and reward good processes, smart experiments, and especially candor, regardless of the result.
Which leads to the simplest, most powerful behavior, expressing appreciation.
Every single act of candor, especially when it's bad news, has to be met with a micro reward. A simple, thank you for bringing that to my attention. If a nurse questions a doctor, that doctor's first words must be, thank you for the question. Then they can explain the situation. That small act of appreciation reinforces the behavior and makes it more likely to happen again. Punish the messenger, even with a frown, and you guarantee silence next time.
You also have to work to destigmatize failure by closing what's called the failure gap.
Right. Research shows that managers privately believe only about 1 to 4% of failures are truly blameworthy. They're preventable violations. But in those same organizations, 70 to 90% of failures are treated as if they're blameworthy. People get reprimanded, their bonuses are cut, they get a bad review.
That is a massive gap.
It's huge, and it's why nothing gets reported. The best way to close that gap is to actively celebrate the learning from intelligent failures. Eli Lilly, the pharmaceutical company, famously started holding failure parties. They would honor a team whose rigorous, well-designed scientific experiment had failed.
And it wasn't just for morale.
No, it had hard business logic. First, it encouraged people to take smart risks. Second, it meant they reported the failure quickly so resources could be moved to more promising projects. And third, it shared the learning across the whole company so no one else would waste time repeating the same failed experiment.
Okay, but again, the manager's thinking, how do I stop people from becoming complacent?
And that's where the final piece comes in. You have to sanction violations fairly. Psychological safety is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. In fact, when the team sees that someone who willfully breaks the rules or takes reckless shortcuts is held accountable, it actually strengthens psychological safety for everyone else.
Because it proves there are clear boundaries. It shows you're serious about the high-performance side of the equation, too.
Exactly. It proves it's not an anything-goes environment. It builds trust in the fairness of the system. The key is that the response has to be just and focused on the behavior, not a knee-jerk, blame-filled reaction.
So when you boil it all down, it starts with the leader's own behavior.
It has to. You have to model it. Start using simple phrases. I was wrong about that. I need some help here. I'm not sure what to do. What are your thoughts?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. When you, the leader, take off your armor, you give everyone else permission to do the same.
And then model the curiosity.
Ask those simple questions. What are you up against? What can I do to help? Stop looking up the hierarchy for permission and start creating a small pocket of candor and excellence with your own team. That's where real leadership begins. #tag outro. So we've covered a lot of ground, but it comes down to this. In our world, learning is the only sustainable competitive advantage, and you cannot have learning without candor. Psychological safety is simply the climate that makes candor possible.
And that three-part toolkit, setting the stage, inviting participation, and responding productively, isn't a one-time fix. It's a continuous loop, a constant practice. Ultimately, this whole effort is about fighting against those deep psychological forces that push us all towards self-protection. It's about deciding whether you're going to spend your career playing not to lose.
And playing not to lose is such a hollow victory, isn't it? It means your whole focus is on avoiding the downside. Don't get blamed, don't make waves, don't look foolish. It might keep you employed, but it makes you and your organization completely irrelevant over time.
Whereas playing to win is about focusing on the upside. It's about chasing opportunity, taking smart risks, and trying to build something meaningful.
You might stumble along the way. You will have intelligent failures, but you also have a real shot at making a difference.
So here's the final thought, the challenge for you to take away from our conversation today.
Perhaps the fastest way to get psychological safety is to act as if you already have it.
Take one small interpersonal risk this week.
Just one. Ask that question you've been holding back. Admit a small mistake you made. Offer that idea you think is only 80% baked.
Take that small risk, see what happens. Because in that moment, you're not just testing the waters. You are actively making the water safer for everyone else around you.
Go out there, be humble, be curious, and be candid.